Welcome to our first installment of Parenting Today. I am your host, Maria Jackman, and I would like to invite you to explore with us during this program how the Family Partnership Center supports families by providing free parenting education based on the individual needs of each family. In this day and age where families are often isolated and overwhelmed, the Family Partnership Center is providing a similar service to what most of you have seen on the hit TV show, Super Nanny. Through their Parent Partner program, families can secure their own very special parenting educator to provide help with the challenges of raising children. With me today, I have three of the center's parenting educators who will shed some light on the subject and talk about the most common challenges of parenting today and how they are making a difference in the lives of families throughout our area by providing a free parenting education, modeling, and support service. I want to welcome our guests today, Jillian Doyle, Marisol Rodriguez, and Terry Wallace. Welcome to Parenting Today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Why don't we start by, Jillian, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Family Partnership Center and how your background has helped you do some of the work there?
Certainly. I came from a background of BAA in child development. Had 5 children of my own, so certainly I would have welcomed a service like this way back when. My children were small, they're all grown now. I went into the Head Start program for quite a long time, first as a teacher and then as an administrator, and enjoyed my work with families and children immensely. And when I moved to Florida, it just happened to be that there was a natural connection and an opportunity for me to join the Family Partnership Center, making home visits, which was familiar to me, and I just loved the work.
Great. Sounds like you're doing a great job. Marisol, do you want to talk a little bit about your background and what you're doing at the Family Partnership Center?
Sure. I have a master's degree in educational psychology. In terms of experience, I've worked within an intensive in-home family support program in New Jersey. I also worked for the Mount Sinai Research Center in New York City, and I was involved in education and training within the U.S. Army.
Great.
Moving here to Florida, parenting education, the opportunity came available, and I jumped right in and have loved it.
And you're the bilingual person in the center?
Yes, I am.
Great. Terry?
My background is in early childhood and special education. I taught in the Manatee school system for many years and then was director of Easter Seals, working with special needs children.
Oh, great.
So with the parenting, I've kind of worked with parents on all levels as a teacher and also as a director of a facility. So this just seemed like a natural fit for me. And I had 4 children of my own,
Okay.
1 with special needs, and I have 7 grandchildren.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. So it seems like even though you guys come from different backgrounds, it's all blending very well at the center. Jillian, why don't we start with you? I understand that you are doing the parenting and support groups in the at the Family Partnership Center. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, what it entails, and how long you've been doing it?
Certainly. The group sessions bring together many parents from different walks of life. We do have parents in our group on Tuesday evening, and they come from either voluntary enrollments or from state-mandated enrollments. We spend 8 weeks together, and we talk about all aspects of parenting, all the way from child development up to family growth and development. Each session is supported by some very excellent videos, and the parents get to interact with one another and to help one another through the typical challenges that they face. And they find a lot of comfort, I think, in finding out that other parents are facing the same things that they are.
Right.
And so that really helps, and it begins to establish a network for them of other people that they can talk to and work with, maybe even beyond the group sessions.
Great. When you say you spend 8 weeks with them, do you meet once a week? What does it look like? What does the model look like?
We meet every Tuesday evening, and we meet in the First United Methodist Church, downtown Bradenton. They're very generous in giving us space there, and each session lasts 2 hours, roughly. We do provide child care.
That's great.
We have a wonderful child care provider, and she will have anywhere from 1 to 8 children that she works with in a really nice facility that is set up for daycare.
Is that free or is that an additional charge?
Nope, that's all free.
Oh, wow, that's
And
great.
the
Yeah.
parents do receive a text, and I usually provide handouts regarding the topics each week and give them a folder so that when they get done, they actually have their own little booklet that they can refer to. And they can repeat. They can come back. If they feel they missed anything, they can come back and they can re-enroll. So.
Great, that sounds like a good program. Marisol, I understand you do the in-home visits, bilingual. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, and also about the teenage parenting program?
Sure. I've had the pleasure, the opportunity to work with our Spanish-speaking parents in-home. Sometimes a little bit challenging. One challenge that I never say that I've overcome is having to continuously learn the intricacies of different cultures within the Hispanic community.
Right, because it's not just speaking
No,
Spanish, right?
Absolutely not. Every culture is different. They parent differently, they discipline differently. So that's been a challenge that as time passes, I've been able to overcome by simply educating myself.
Absolutely.
I see these families, our Hispanic-speaking families, are some of our neediest families because their typical support, their family and friends, are thousands upon thousands of miles away. So they're very isolated.
Sure.
And sometimes engagement with them can be a little difficult. They tend to be a very private population, so building trust initially is key. But once that happens, learning can take place, and they often, almost always, really appreciate the parenting education that we provide.
So you spend a lot of time building that trust. Is
Absolutely.
it because of like all the immigration issues and everything that's been going on, they're a little skittish about somebody coming into their home?
Absolutely.
Okay.
At some point, I need them to see me as their ally. I'm there to help.
Absolutely.
I'm there to make the transition in this country a little bit easier. I'm there to support them.
And talking about transition, that's a great point that you just brought up. You want to talk a little bit about the challenges of the discipline difference between maybe how they did it in their country versus here? Would you say that's one of your biggest reasons for doing in-home?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
The way they parent in their own countries is often very different from the way we parent here. Their discipline methods, unfortunately, are not accepted in our country. We're very strict in terms of what is and not allowed by law here in the state of Florida.
Absolutely, yes.
Communicating that information can be so beneficial and keep that family essentially united. So that's something that we not often, but almost always address, especially
Okay.
initially.
Great.
And you also mentioned TAP.
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'll talk a little
What
bit
does
about
TAP-
that.
what does that stand
TAP?
for?
TAP stands for Teenage Parenting Program. Something that I enjoy very much is I work with our pregnant and parenting teens at our local middle school and high school.
Great.
These girls have a lot on their plate. A lot, and I give them a lot of credit because I am working with them because they decided to stay in school.
That's great, and that's huge. Because
Absolutely.
as
I
we all
applaud
know,
that.
being a mom is hard enough.
Yeah.
Coupled with, you know, being a teenage parent, having to get up, go to
Yes.
school, take your child to daycare. Yes.
So initially, I applaud them for that. Lots of challenges. Okay, they have to deal with lack of support sometimes. There's no involved partner. They have to deal with lack of finances. They have to deal with, and the number one is juggling a child and going to school
Sure.
and a home life. It's hard enough for any of us. Imagine also being a teen.
Absolutely.
You know, they're developing alongside their child. So there's a lot to contend with there. I work at the middle school, at the local middle school and high school with them on a weekly basis.
Okay, great.
A lot of education and a lot of mentoring.
Good. Terry and Jillian, you also have seen teenage parents in your in-home parenting program, right?
Absolutely. One of the first parents I worked with was a 16-year-old mom who had just brought her baby home from the hospital, and we stayed with her for a little over a year. And she really valued the non-threatening opportunity to work in her own home. She was living with her own mom, And she was really a good little mom. She just really had good instincts for her child. She needed to hear that from someone so that she felt reassured that what she was feeling she should do was the right thing. And certainly there were some real issues with school attendance and sickness for the child and things like that that we worked that whole year on just managing that whole situation that Marisol described. And I think in the end, she was off to a great start.
That's great.
And that is a challenge for the teens when they're living with their parents, because the parents sometimes take on the role as the parent of the baby. Yes. And so there's conflict there also. So that's something that we work with them on too, and building them up so that they can handle that.
That's a great point. Co-parenting is huge, because even as adults, we know when we bring our baby home, and even when we, maybe our mother-in-law, our own mothers, sometimes they know best, so they try to give you advice, and it really becomes sometimes a challenge. You couple that with a teenage mom that is basically just coming into her own, so that's a great point.
And being dependent on their parents financially, it's definitely a problem.
Which you brought up a point, Marisol, about you spend a lot of time building them up with self-esteem. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. They are often at a place in their lives where they're trying to develop as a teenager and learn who they are themselves. But yet, here's a little person who depends on them 100%, 24 hours a day, and they need the confidence in order to parent. We all do.
Absolutely.
Every parent needs their own level of confidence in order to be effective. If we're kind of doubting ourselves, kids sense that. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we work towards, is letting them know, listen, I just watched what you did with your child. You did a great job. Good. And nobody had to tell you to do that.
That's right, encouragement.
So it's constant encouragement. That's why the mentoring piece is so very important in my eyes.
Great. So really, alongside education, a lot of the mentoring and modeling really is what's going to make that model work, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Now, Terry, you deal with special needs. You said you yourself, you are the mom of a son that was special needs.
Right.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the challenges and what you see when you go into the homes with kids with special needs? Maybe give a little examples.
Well, there's multiple challenges because some of the parents themselves have special needs.
Sure.
86% of the families that I work with have at least one member of their family that has special needs. So that's pretty high.
That's very high.
And we're covering all sorts of things from ADHD, speech and learning, speech and language impairments, autism, Tourette syndrome, Down syndrome. I have some deaf children, so some with multiple disabilities. So first of all, the parents, when they first find out that their child has a disability, it's very difficult for them because they had all these hopes for them, hopes and dreams, and all of a sudden they have to go through this grieving process because life for their child is going to be very different than what they had anticipated.
Because we all do.
When they first had their perfect little baby. Mm-hmm. So that's something. So a lot of times they're dealing with depression, they're dealing with grief, all sorts of just really, really difficult things. They bring their child someplace and people make fun of their child, or people are judging them because their child misbehaves in public. Just all sorts of things that sometimes people don't, deal with. And having their child in social groups is very difficult because there's many times these children don't know how to interact with other kids, don't know how to play with other kids.
Sure.
Many times communication skills, both verbally and non-verbally. So there's all sorts of situations that are very, very difficult for these families. So when I go in, the number one thing is building them up, just as Marisol said with the teens. That's just so important.
Sure.
They need to be built up. They have had so many difficult times, and a lot of times they're all by themselves. They've kind of, because they have been ridiculed, that they kind of just stay home and they don't do a whole lot with other people.
So isolation kind of sets in.
Absolutely. So building them up, noticing their strengths and their child's strengths, because everyone has strengths, and if we can build on those strengths, we can do a lot.
We can overcome a lot.
We can overcome a whole lot. So building on those strengths is paramount. It's critical. And by doing so, by noticing their strengths, I'm also building trust with them. And they're able to open up, and they're willing to try different things. My background being in special needs, I do have experience working with all sorts of different children and working with therapists, so there's a lot of information that I can bring into them. And once the trust is built, we're able to work together. And a lot of it's hands-on,
Sure.
especially with my parents who are special needs themselves. Sure. It's real slow, step-by-step, hands-on learning.
Is it a fair statement to say that sometimes when you have a child with special needs and you get plugged into either Social Security, disability, or all the other things, doctor's appointments, therapist appointments, OT, physical therapy, that sometimes that's where the parent actually kind of grieves silently because all the attention is on that child? And how about like other siblings that might be, do you see?
Yes, I do. I very much other siblings are affected. The parents, sometimes when I go visit the parents, they want the attention from me themselves because they are so used to giving everything that they have.
They're spent, basically.
You see that a lot too? Absolutely. So they are looking for attention, and they really, they feed off of, like when I encourage them, it does wonders for them because many times these parents have not been encouraged at all. People have found fault with them, whether it be, sometimes even when they, go to doctor's visits,
Sure.
How come you're not doing this, how come you're not doing that? So, as I said before, we try to build on the strengths and notice what they're doing right. The siblings have definitely been affected. It's rough when you're a sibling of a special needs
Absolutely.
child. You're not getting as much attention, everything, especially if you have a child that who has very aggressive behaviors. A lot of time, and energy is spent on that child. So, it's working with the parent with the other children also, and giving them attention. We do a lot of play when I visit the families. Sure. A lot of sitting down on the floor playing, trying to get the kids to interact together.
That's great.
Because
social skills.
Right. So much of what we do, it's learning step by step. Lots of repetition, lots of encouragement, lots of role modeling. And it seems to work. It might take a while, but it seems to be pretty effective with the families I work with.
You brought up a good point that I want to kind of throw out to the group. Families of origin. Do you see a lot of the families that you're serving right now that maybe part of the problem was that they didn't really have a clear model in their own upbringing to parent? And what are your feelings about that?
I guess I'd like to comment on that. When the parents come into group, I usually ask them a couple of questions. I want them to think about, and not necessarily share. They aren't quite comfortable with each other at first.
At that point, yeah.
But I do ask them to think just mentally about the best thing that they remember about being a child that involved a parent. And then I ask them, after they've had a few minutes to do that, what was the worst thing that you remember as a child and related to a parent? And after that, we talk about the fact that they are actually in the process of making their children's memories. Mm-hmm. And that if that single thought will help them to stop before they react in a certain way that might be negative and create a negative memory for that child, that in itself is very valuable.
That's
because
huge.
Parenting, family of origin, the fact is that we bring to parenting only what we have learned, usually from our own parents. Sometimes that's absolutely wonderful stuff, Sometimes some of it is wonderful and some of it is not.
Absolutely.
I tell them, what I want you to do is suspend everything right now that you've ever heard from your great-grandma, your mom, your dad, everything that happened to you. I want you to suspend that for now, and we're going to study and learn together. And during this, visualize that we're putting all of these parenting nuggets, little pieces of knowledge on the table. And when we're done with the course, then you're going to be able to decide which ones you want to pick back up and put in your own toolbox.
There you go.
Because you've got to have a toolbox. And parenting is the one thing, sadly, unlike the TAP program, at least these young women are getting some help in learning how to be a parent. Most of us came to parenting with nothing.
Absolutely.
Nothing in the way of formal training or direction other than what we saw in our own homes.
This is a great point, because when we become parents, we kind of make a decision. We think, okay, the way I was parented is the way I'm going to parent, or the way I was parented is not the way I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Or some of those things that I learned, I'm going to use with my own children. If you're one of those people who does not want to parent the same way, or kind of does, where do you go from there?
Absolutely.
Now you don't have the experience to go on. Where do you go from there? A program like Family Partnership Center.
Absolutely, because when you pick up your baby at the hospital, it doesn't come with a book.
There's no manual.
No. And like sometimes you will raise two children. You say, okay, I raised them the same way, never had any problems with this one, and now I'm having all kinds of issues because of temperament and other things. But yeah, it's absolutely right. Where do you go? You go to the Family Partnership Center. Do you see, in your dealing with a special needs population, do you see a lack of, or a barrier to engaging to your services? Does it take a little while for them to warm up when you start visiting them, or do you see a hunger? I mean, what's your experience?
I see a hunger because many of these families have not gotten the support that they need. They have looked for support in different areas, but they haven't felt like they've been able to get it. There are support groups, but it's really hard to find a support group that fits, and it's hard to go to support groups because, you know, if you have other children, and a lot of times there's not babysitting and that sort of thing. So for somebody to come into the home and work with them, you know, in their natural setting, in the child's natural setting, which really makes a huge difference, because a lot of times the special needs children have difficulty, you know, when they're in other settings.
Right, and outside.
Right, very difficult time with transitions. So when they're at home, you know, they feel the most comfortable, and the parents feel the most comfortable having them at home. So they've been pretty quick to engage.
Okay, that's
you know,
great.
there's a little bit of a trust issue because of the judgments, but, you know, once they learn that, hey, I'm not judging you. And I think, too, because I had a special needs child, I kind of understand, you know, a part of it. I mean, every child is different, and every disability is different. But I think that because of that, I understand, you know, how difficult and challenging it can be. So...
Yeah, because you've actually experienced it yourself as a parent. So.
Right, and that seems to make a difference with them, because when I first see them, I share a little bit about myself, you know, as far as my family and everything. So
that connection, going back to what you were saying, connecting with the parents, going back to the bilingual, the Spanish population, how do you handle the challenge that I would probably see? We have a very diverse, Spanish population, from people with PhDs, people that are working out in the fields. So when you go into a home, how do you actually just make that boundary? How do you present the program so it can benefit either side of the spectrum?
There's a lot of tailoring in the work that we do. I think that we can all agree that when we first go and work with a parent, assessing their needs is something that is the priority.
Okay.
Where are they at emotionally? Where are they at socially? Where are they at educationally? There's all sorts of things to assess when we walk in. Our ability to tailor our services to their needs is what's going to guarantee success.
It's huge.
We haven't done anything. If we've gone in and worked with a mom and after 10 weeks, nothing's been learned, nothing's changed, no new behaviors, no new discipline methods, no new communication strategies. But if we can tailor it to her specific needs and her child's needs, then we've gotten somewhere.
Sure.
It's all about tailoring.
And certainly there isn't an end spot that we're all working toward, because people are on this continuum.
It's like a spectrum,
and
isn't it?
wherever they
Yes.
are, if we bring them further toward a more positive goal of relationships in their family, then we've made progress.
And we
we've
all can learn.
succeeded. And everybody is
We all
learning.
can learn. And I'm afraid that I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think that that is something that is different about the Family Partnership Center, is that we don't have a set curriculum. We do a comprehensive intake at the beginning and assess where the family's
So
at.
it's tailored for the family.
Absolutely.
Great.
So every time we go in to meet our families, we have an individual curriculum that's just for them.
For them.
We don't mass produce a curriculum that we use for everybody.
Great. And I'm afraid we're running out of time, so why don't you guys give me one lasting thought that you may want to share with our audience today about the importance of parenting education. Jillian, we'll start with you.
Well, parents are definitely the most important people in children's lives. They are their first and their longest lasting teacher. When children are grown, they become our peers. And not necessarily in a friendship situation, although we hope that we will also be friends, but we will spend a lot more of our lives, hopefully, as peers with our children than we did in raising them.
Great. Marisol?
Parenting, education, it's not necessary, it's absolutely critical for anybody, for any parent. As a mom of 2 amazing little girls, I could use as much information as I can get my hands on constantly.
Wonderful. Terry?
I think that our goal is to help parents be the best parents that they can be, so in turn their children can be the best that they can be.
We can break that cycle and we can start anew. That's great. So as you can see, parents throughout our area from a variety of walks of lives are experiencing great results in working with the Family Partnership Center. Families do not need to be in crisis in order to take advantage of their program. In actuality, all parents can benefit from additional support and information. Families face bigger challenges than ever before in keeping their children safe and healthy in this complex world we live in. It is too hard to have to do it alone. And thanks to the Family Partnership Center, you do not have to. In our upcoming segments, we will be exploring how to use proactive discipline methods to help your child modify his behavior, tips from the experts on how to use stress management and self-care to benefit your role as a parent, and ways to organize your family time. Those are just a few of the exciting topics we will be covering in our upcoming segments of Parenting Today. This is Maria Jackman saying see you next time, but until then, remember that parenting is the most important job you will ever do, and thanks to the Family Partnership Center, you do not have to do it alone.